Hello, I'm Gwen again, and this is the third and final video in my series called Unleashing Ourself. And this series is meant as an introduction to some of the topics that we'll be exploring in my 6-month circle called Unleashing Our Mothers, Unleashing Ourselves. And the link to that is below this video for you to check out if that's at all interesting to you. In the first video, I talked about mother-daughter relationships and how those are impacted by our culture, as well as intergenerational trauma, how trauma is passed down through the generations by our ancestors over and over and over. And then in the second video, I talked about our loss of sisterhood, and how we as women are encouraged by our culture to stay disconnected from each other, to remain competitive with each other, to not be trustful of each other, and and all of that, how culture really impacts our relationships with other women beyond our families and ancestors. And today I am going to talk a bit about our relationship with ourselves, and especially as women, because that's my experience. um, but this is true for all people, regardless of gender, in that our culture very much encourages us to remain disconnected from our own self, remain disconnected from our body, remain disconnected from really using our minds, to remain disconnected from our spirit and our soul, and to be caught up in this rat race that that is our current version of capitalist patriarchal culture, um, and talk about just all the ways that our culture really impacts the way we think about ourselves. How this isn't all our mother's fault, right? Much has been placed at the foot of mothers and motherhood as being totally responsible for all the um, horrible things that happen in the world. And while certainly ourselves as mothers and our own mothers and their mothers and so on are responsible for our own actions and for the ways we are in the world, there are also greater forces at work that that impact our abilities to truly be the people, the parents, that we want to be. And so, right? So today I really want to talk about how those stories that get stuck in our heads about how we aren't enough, about how we're too much, how we take up too much space, how we um, how we need to keep doing better, right? How we should feel shame about our bodies, no matter what our body looks like, right? That we should be ashamed if it's too skinny, if it's too fat, if it's the wrong skin color, if it has, if as women we have big boobs or we have small boobs or we have exactly right boobs, whatever that means, right? As well as the ways we are told to shame our bodies in how they function, right? If we have any sort of health issues, then clearly we're not trying hard enough, right? Whatever that triumph looks like by whatever expert is telling us that. So, mm, um, so these stories run deep, right? These stories about how we aren't enough, these stories about how we're too much, all the shame that we carry around about being women, about being female, about existing, about daring to take up any space at all. about daring to have a voice in anything at all. And I want to apologize. Speaking of voice, I want to apologize a little bit about my voice. I've had a sore throat for the past few days, so I'm on the mend, but I have this very not my usual voice happening right now. So so we are very much damned if we do, damned if we don't, right? As women, we are told that motherhood is the all fulfilling, all encompassing thing. And that if we choose not to be mothers or aren't able to become mothers for any number of reasons, then we are less than as women. At the exact same time, right? We're told that if we make a choice, if we do choose and are able to have children, and then if we make a choice to stay home and care for our young children, then we're failing again because we aren't out in the work world, right? And we're just, there's this idea that the stay-at-home mom is someone who lays on the couch popping bomb bonbons into her mouth all day, right? And any of us who have ever had small children or ever been around a woman who has small children know very well that that is not reality, right? Um, that especially when they're little, that is definitely not reality. So there's this idea that if we decide to become mothers and are able to become mothers and do become mothers and then make the choice that we're told will fulfill us of staying home with them, then we're lazy, we're failing society, we're not contributing, we don't work, right? um And we start to take in those stories, right? Now, whether we're taking in these stories about motherhood, about careers, about our weight or our body size or shape, about our hair color, about how intelligent we are, about I mean, I could list all of the ways that we're shamed for being too much or not enough. I could go on this list for days and days and days, right? And we all know these stories. We all know them because we all experience them, right? And we all have those questions of, we all internalize the question of, what is wrong with me, right? We take in these stories about that we're told constantly through media, through family, through mentors, through school, through coworkers, through bosses, through social media, through the stories we make up in our heads as we're walking through a park and we see this perfect family on the hill having a picnic, right? I mean, all of these ways that we are bombarded with how we as individuals don't measure up, right? We, of course, internalize that question and that message of, what is wrong with me? Why don't I have it all together? Why can't I do all the things? Why am I so flawed as a human being, as a woman? You know, Susie clearly has it all together, right? Her career's going great. She has these beautiful kids. Her marriage is perfect, right? And while that may be the way Susie's presenting to the world, right? We don't have any idea what's going on behind those closed doors. We don't have any idea what's going on, not on Facebook and not on Twitter and not on Instagram, right? We don't have any idea what her actual internal lived experience is. When my daughter was very young, she's almost 10 now. When she was very, very young, I was working as an electrical engineer. I was an electrical engineer before I was pregnant with her, and then through her first few years of life. And the first couple years of her life, I was still trying to work full time. I was, and by full time, let me really define that to mean 50, 60, 70-hour weeks, right? I was trying to do all the things and be this perfect mother. I bought into the idea that, that in doing the things, that that made me a good parent, right? And by the things, I mean all of her baby food was homemade. All of her baby food was homemade. That child did not eat anything out of a package until she was like 4. Um, we cloth diapered. Uh, Only wooden toys. No plastic, no TV, no screens. And, this was a decade ago, so screens weren't as much of a thing in little kids' toys as they are now. Um, but it was very, like, I had that list, right? That list of, if I'm doing these things, then this means I'm a good mom, right? So I was doing all the things. So I was clearly a good mom, right? I was trying to keep up at my job. And being relatively successful at it at first, for the first year or so. And then things kind of started to fall apart because I was falling apart, right? I hosted dinner parties at our house, game nights, play dates, right? All these things, like doing all these things that would make anyone from the outside looking in going, oh, what a great life, right? What no one knew during those first 2.5 years of her life, my daughter's life, was that I was suffering horribly from postpartum depression, um, and that I was actually suicidal. Um, there was, I could probably say there wasn't a night that went by in her, or a day that went by in her first 2.5 years that I didn't think of a way to kill myself. Like, I was so depressed. I was so unhappy. I was so frustrated. I was so overwhelmed with motherhood, with trying to keep up with all the boys at work who all had wives at home, care of everything, right? My husband was working a job. He was not at home taking care of all the things, right? Um, and I was dying inside. On top of this, I was having health issues that weren't diagnosed yet. I didn't know that I was having health issues. So so there were physical complications that were also happening that were then affecting my moods, and all of that, right? So it's but nobody knew. And when I told my friends afterwards, like after I went to the doctor, after I got diagnosed with the thyroid issues, after I started taking medication for my thyroid, after I went part-time at work, after things started picking up in my marriage was falling apart too. Nobody knew. Nobody had a clue. We were literally, this close to filing divorce. It was really bad. Um, but nobody knew that. No one. And when I told friends after the fact, they were shocked. And they thought I was kidding, right? They couldn't believe that any of that was going on. But it was. It was. So we never know what is going on behind that Instagram picture, right? We never know what's actually happening with that family having that beautiful picnic on the hill on that sunny day at the park, right? We don't know. We don't know because we're told to stay disconnected, because we're told to continue competing with other women, because we're told that we can't trust other women, because, right? All of that. And because we constantly get this message of how we aren't good enough and everybody else has their shit together. And there's something wrong with us because we don't. It is a cultural message. It is a message from our misogynist, our white supremacist, our racist, our homophobic, our ableist, our, right, all the things culture, capitalist culture. I don't know if there's a word for hating poor people, but we certainly hate poor people, right? You know, they're lazy. These are the messages, right? And I grew up poor, right? So the message I got, being a child growing up on welfare for a period of time when my parents divorced, my mom was going to school to try and to become a nurse so that she could support us, right? The message that I got as my mom is working her ass off, right, was that she was lazy and that she was less than, right? And she got that message too. She was getting that message. And my mom was working herself so hard, right? But we get these messages and we grow up with these messages and we take them in. So then, right, then we're sitting here in this pit of how we don't measure up, how we're way too much, how we don't deserve love, how we aren't lovable, how we're broken, how, right, da, 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 right? We're sitting in this pit of these messages. We realize it's all bullshit, right? All these messages are bullshit. We start to do the work that we need to do to unravel those messages, to get them out of our bodies, to get them out of our psyches. And eventually, right, it's a slow process, right? And eventually we do come to a place of actually feeling okay in our skin. Actually feeling pretty okay about our lives, even though they're not perfect, even though, you know, nobody's going to come and put us on the cover of any magazines, right? But we're okay. Like, it's okay. My life is okay. I'm okay. My body's okay. The way I am in the world is okay. Even if it's awkward, even if sometimes I'm weird, even if, it's okay, right? So we get to this point of being like, I'm okay. And we're still getting messages over and over and over again about how we aren't okay. So even when we are in that place of how I'm okay, we're still getting messages that we aren't. And of course, as we receive these messages, we start to doubt and we start to question again. And we start to go, oh, well, maybe there really is something wrong with me. Oh, maybe I'm not trying hard enough, right? And of course, because we've done this work, we're able to then take ourselves out of that very downward spiral, right? But we still are going to have those doubts because these messages are constant. They're constant. And that's intentional, right? It's intentional. Because once we start to feel okay about who we are, then we start to realize that she's okay the way she is. And then we start connecting. And then we start really going, wow, this really is a bunch of bullshit we live in. And more people see that and we connect to more people and we start to tear it down, right? We start to tear it down by simply existing and not buying into the lie. And having a circle of support that helps to boost us up and helps remind us that, yeah, that's all bullshit, right? And yeah, of course it's normal that we doubt. And yeah, of course it's normal that we question. And yeah, of course. And we get to feel all that. We get to process all that. We get to go through all of that, right? And we really are okay. It's not us. It's not us at all. It is the culture we live in. It is the culture our mothers lived in, and our grandmothers, and our great-grandmothers, and our great-great-grandmothers, and on and on and on and on, right? So how do we undo it, right? How do we keep unraveling it? How do we start to unravel it? My journey was coming into my body, that was like the very first thing. That was the very first thing. Starting to count my breaths, reminding myself to be present. I tried meditation. Meditation's really not my thing, but it is for some people. And so absolutely. I did yoga. Right. I did a lot of things where I would, that were all about being present and noticing that I was getting upset about something and taking a step back, like sometimes literally a step back, um, and taking a deep breath or letting my breath out because I'm a breath holder. So letting out a deep sigh, right? I would write words on my arms that said love or breathe or gentle or, right? To just remind myself to be that way with myself, with my daughter, with my husband, right? And slowly, 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 it evolved into all the things it's evolved into. You know, there were books, there was therapy, there, you know, there's a lot. There was groups, circles, women's groups, right? There was a lot of different things that were involved, and here I am today, right? I feel mostly good in my body most of the time. I am mostly okay with who I am most of the time. And I still hear those messages, right? I still hear those messages. They still pop up every now and then about how I'm not trying hard enough, or how I'm not good enough, or how if this happens, I'm clearly a failure, or how because of this way that I live that I'm a failure, or, right? All of that still pops up. It still popped up. It's not as loud. I don't buy into it as deeply or as quickly. Um, I can go, oh yeah, I hear you. Okay, I'm doubting. Okay, analyze. Am I really not doing enough? Oh no, I actually am. I'm okay. I'm okay. Right. And I didn't do this alone at all. I did this with therapists. I did this in groups. I did this with friends. I did this in partnership with my husband, right? I did this in community. This wasn't a solo project. So, which is why I offer circles, which is why most of my work is group work, because I deeply believe that it is through community and in community that we are really able to start breaking down all of uh, the programming, conditioning, socialization, whatever stories, lies, whatever we want to call it, that our culture puts on us and that we internalize. Because we start to see we're not the only ones. Right? We start to see we're not alone. And while we all have our own unique journeys, often there's a lot of similarities, right? And we start to see that. And then we see, oh, I'm not the only one. And oh, she's as fucked up as I am, right? Fucked up as I am. And we start to realize that actually there's not anything wrong with her either, right? And we form community and we build more and on and on and on, and it snowballs. So like I said, the link to this next circle, like I said at the beginning, the link to this next circle is there below. I would love for you to join us. If you have any questions, of course, always feel free to contact me and ask. We begin on April 1st, so a little over a week, and it's an intimate group. There will be no more than 8 participants. Because it's really, that's really important to me, to keep that intimacy so that we can really, really connect with each other. Okay, that's all I've got for the day. I hope that you enjoyed this series, and I will hopefully connect with you soon.